In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Good morning. Today, we're going to talk about faith. We hear it multiple times in the gospel, and we're going to talk about how that faith transforms us and what do we do with that faith. Faith is an interesting thing. It's something that we think of that we might classify our entire faith, an entire denomination, an entire religion. It's something that might encompass all faiths. It's something that we can be different, but we can also be the same. We might be able to say we're the same in a sense of we have faith in a higher being. We have faith in Christianity. We have faith in Orthodoxy. Then it trickles down from there. So there's many different things that you can say the word faith and have it mean. But in this case, it's someone who believes. Someone who truly believes, not out of just necessity or because something is brought forth to them, but because there's nothing else that their mind can possibly understand, that all there is left is to believe. And we see that today. We see two examples of faith. We see an example of faith in the woman who had the issue of blood for 12 years, and then we see the faith of Jairus, who was a leader of the synagogue, who at that point was going against all that Judaism had to offer at that time. And we'll explain that too. When we think of faith, think of the times of which we are the most faithful. Easter. What else? For the feast days. Okay, let's encompass all the feast days together. Think about when we go directly to our faith. What else?
Crisis.
And crisis. Perfect. In times of need, right? So faith comes out of the times of need. Think of someone who's in the hospital, a loved one being in the hospital, right? What is the first thing they do? Or maybe the second or third or fifth thing they do? It's call the priest. Call me, right? It might be the first thing, it might be the 10th thing, who knows? But eventually I get called. Or we call each other and ask for people for their prayers, right? So sometimes our faith comes out of need. And not sometimes, that's actually most of the time. If you think about how many people, no matter what denomination, no matter what, whenever they are in need, the first thing they do is they turn to God or a higher power, whatever that might look like, depending on the individual. They turn to their faith. Now, it isn't a transaction, right? It's not like you go to the store and you give them $10 and you get groceries. No. So you don't just turn to God and say, God, I'd like a miracle today. I'm going to wake up tomorrow. I'm going to be totally healed. It might happen. You don't know. God's powerful. It might happen right there at that moment. You might have asked for it tomorrow. It might have happened then. Or you're asking for it to wake up and be everything fine, and it's 10 years from now. And you see that example today. Jairus went to the teacher, went to Christ to heal his daughter who was dying, and expected, right now, I need you to come and do this. The woman with the issue of 12 years of blood, guess what? She was suffering for 12 years and finally came to Christ. So there's plenty of examples to go through here. With Jairus, he was impatient. He got what he wanted. You heard the story. They both got what they wanted. But there were two different ways of getting there. And they're not transactional either. So it isn't a give or take thing. All Christ said was, your faith has made you well in both cases. So when you think of the woman who had the issue of 12 years with her blood, she exhausted, if you look at all the different gospels, right? Because there's 4 different gospels, and every gospel has an account of some of the others, and some of them have overlap. All right? This is one of those ones that overlaps. So if you look at the Gospel of Matthew, even though we read from Luke, if you read from the Gospel of Matthew, hear the woman having basically a conversation with herself. If only I touch the hem of this garment, I may finally be healed. And it was like a mantra. It was like a mantra she was saying to herself over and over again to fight through this large gathering of people. And she gave it to herself enough power to be able to touch the hem of the garment. It also says in Matthew that she exhausted every possible thing. She was wealthy and lost all of it to figure out what was wrong with her. She exhausted every possible science, doctor, this, that, healing, whatever, and finally turned to Christ. So there's a teaching about our faith. We don't just go right there at the end when we've exhausted everything. that shows pride in ourselves, thinking that we can do it by ourselves. We don't need God. It's a basic thing. We have this, we're going to overcome it. Let's say you have a stomach pain or whatever it is, and you go, and the doctor tells you to do X, Y, Z things. Okay, and then what happens when it doesn't happen? Then you turn to God. No, turn to God first and then go to the doctor. Because guess what? God gave the doctor the talents to do what she's asking you to do. That didn't just happen overnight. Remember, we talked about the talents that we have, the gifts that we have. They're not ours. We didn't do them. You didn't become a skilled physician. You didn't become a contractor. You didn't become these things. God gave you the power and skill set to be able to do that, and for you to see it, that you have that skill set. Remember, we have to retrain our minds sometimes. And faith is the same way. We don't go to God after we've exhausted everything. No, we go to God first. And then we exhaust everything together with God, if we need to. Right? The woman with the 12 issues of blood eventually was healed because of her faith. Even when she exhausted every possible option, wonderful. Guess what? She had one left, and that was God, and that was to be healed. And all she had to do was have that faith. And even though it took all of those opportunities before Christ in touching his hem of the garment, it was still a faithful touch. So much that he felt the power come away from him. You heard today, who touched me? In a crowd of 1,000 people, Christ asked who touched him. Then you even see Peter say, there's a bunch of people here. We don't know who touched you. Everyone touched you. Who knows who touched you? So another lesson about faith. She tried to stay private in her faith. Only if I touch the hem of the garment. Only if I just keep it so simple and I might just touch it and see what happens and run away. No, she was caught. And she was said, someone touched me. And eventually, the question was asked so many times, she came forth and said, it was me. It was I who touched you. And they had a whole conversation that ended in, if I only knew that I could touch the hem of your garment, I knew that I would be healed. That faith that Christ not only felt come out of him, but the faith that she had, and then the opportunity that he had given her to show forth to everyone. Oh, man. And you want to know how many things this went against? In Judaism, when you think about clean and unclean things, uncleanliness can transfer from person to person in their mindset. And back then, right? Uncleanly things can transfer uncleanliness. But clean things cannot transfer the clean. So when you think about this interaction, well, guess what? Christ, who is deemed clean, to the woman who's deemed unclean, what happened? The exact opposite of what was happening in the Judaism belief back then happened. The uncleanliness was made clean by someone who was clean. It threw him for a loop. Even when you think of, the antithesis of what's happening. Jairus, a leader of the synagogue, is going to Christ, who the same people, the same level of individuals who were there later on crucifying him. The antithesis is what's happening. The exact opposite of what's happening. So sometimes our faith doesn't make sense. The logic that exists in this world does not make sense when you start incorporating faith more into your life. It isn't a checklist of things. It isn't something that you can just do and it's all going to be made well. It's not a checklist. It sometimes doesn't have logic. Miraculous things happen every single day. Little, small, whatever you might deem as a miracle. It's how you perceive it. It's how your brain recognizes it. It's how you and your faith recognizes it. To this woman who had an issue with 12 blood, she finally recognized it after 12 years. Jairus recognized it very early enough that he knew if I went to go get Christ and I brought him to my daughter, that he would save her. And his impatience is what you see in the gospel today. He kept trying to push Christ towards the house where he was living, where the daughter was laying down in bed, and kept pushing. And then eventually one of his servants came and said, I'm sorry, master, your daughter died. Don't bother the master anymore. And it was actually sarcastic. Don't bother the master anymore. But then Christ caught them in that conversation and said, do not worry, do not weep, do not be sad. In time, this will happen. And lo and behold, what happened? In God's time, His daughter was healed, resurrected from the dead. It's a beautiful moment to see how faith can transition and transform, because it was the man's faith, not the servant, the one that came and notified him, but the man's faith that knew if I brought Christ here, my daughter would be healed. He had the faith. The outcome was what was frustrating to him. Whereas you had the woman who didn't have the faith initially and then finally found the faith to come. Two completely different lessons of faith. And sometimes we fall in each of those categories depending on what part in time we are in our life. The whole point is our faith transforms us. You see that our faith, even as mustard seeds, moving them from place to place, moving a mountain from one to there, you see elements of faith and lessons of faith in the Scriptures where you see amazing things happening, whether it be in the Scriptures or whether it be through stories and traditions of the saints, whether it be whatever it might be. Miracles happen all of the time. And it's a transformation that occurs, where the things that might make sense in the world basically get flipped over. Because miracles don't make sense. Miracles are things that are unexplained. The mysteries, the sacraments. These are things that can't be explained. That's why they're called mysteries. The Greek word for sacraments, for example, is mysteria in Greek. It's a mystery. But we see it. We have evidence of it. It's here strictly in the Gospels, but also in our lives. You see it. It's there. The point is you have to have it. And obviously, you came to church on Sunday, so you have it. At least that's my indication. That would be the indication. If you don't and you're here, we got coffee hour, I guess. I don't know. But the point is you have it. It's in you. And you have to see it. And you have to allow it to be nurtured so that you can therefore not wait till the last moment to come to God, but allow it to be something that's one of the first things that you do. Because we see that example. However, the outcome can still be the same. Faith is frustrating. Being faithful is frustrating. You're going to go against what society tells you. You're going to go against what your friends might tell you. You're going to go against what your work might tell you. You're going against the grain. And it's frustrating. It might be 12 years frustrating. It might be moments frustrating. But the point is to get through it and to persevere, because that faith that you have will transform you if you allow it. But that's on you. It's not on me. It's not on God. It's on you. Your free will. Where does God come first or last or in between is on you, and where you do and what you choose to do. We have more power than we think. And the power of our faith isn't just to say that we have it, but to know that we have it. Huge difference. To say that we're faithful, to say that we're Orthodox, to say that we're Christian is a completely different ball game than actually being Christian, than actually being Orthodox, than actually being faithful. To say that we're faithful, we're spiritual, we're this. Cool. Those are adjectives. But to be faithful, those are verbs. That's action. That means every moment that you emphasize your faith, you are brushing up together with God and you're given an opportunity to be strengthened. That's the beauty of prayer. That's the beauty of fasting. That's the beauty of all of our spiritual disciplines that we've talked about now for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. Every single one of those moments gives us an opportunity to stand before God, faithful or unfaithfully for that matter. And then we get to see where we stand. But where we stand is on us, not on somebody else. You don't get to put blame anywhere else. If this person didn't do this, then I would be more faithful. If this person didn't do this, then I would be more faithful. It's not their fault. They're human beings too. They make mistakes. You make mistakes. But it's you who are able to get yourself out of that rut. It's only you yourself who's able to pull yourself out of the deep darkness of whatever you're dealing with. Other people will be there to support you. We've said it a million times. Your parish family will always be there to support you. But it's ultimately you who decides how long this is going to go. It can be 12 years or it can be a moment. For you to be able to acknowledge that your faith is active, is a verb, is not just an adjective or just a noun. It's something that is actual verbiage that has action. And that action is that transformation that we see today. So I challenge you all to see this with new eyes of what faith entails. That faith is a verb, it's active, and it's always going to fluctuate. There's going to be high times and there's going to be low times. You know I don't shy away from telling you the truth. It's going to go up and it's going to go down. But how long it stays down is up to you, and how high it stays up is up to you. But it is going to fluctuate. The point is how we get over these things is up to us and our faith and where that stands. Amen.